Hello and welcome to the Comparesoft podcast. Today's guest is Sandy Laird, Project Director and Vice President of Field Services at RRC Companies. For more than 2 decades, Sandy worked across industrial machinery, telecoms, and renewable energy, helping to deliver on large-scale infrastructure projects. In this episode, we'll unpack Sandy's day-to-day responsibilities, the challenges of today when balancing speed and quality for large project delivery, and we'll also explore the realities of delivering in the field, from weather and environmental constraints to stakeholder pressures. We'll also look at where the field service industry is heading, including the growing focus on data centres and battery energy storage, and what success metrics actually matter on site. Awesome. Sandy, hello. Thank you very much for
Hi.
joining us today.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yes, it's really good to have you on board. And if it's all right with you, we'll just jump straight into this chat. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah, that would be
So
great.
awesome. So yeah, you are Project Director and VP of Field Services at RRC Companies. What does a typical day look like for you, and just how much does it vary from day to day?
Well, I think I'm like everybody else. I have to get up and have that cup of coffee. Sometimes I make sure I have a couple ready, make sure there's demand there for that coffee. But first thing, just going through the emails, see if there's anything critical that has happened overnight due to the different time locations of some projects. So I'll go through that. And if there's anything urgent, I'll get on that one right away. And then going through the emails, deciding as far as if there's some that has additional data it's going to take me a little while. I put that to the side, answer the other ones first. But then I always check in with my director every single morning, see if there's anything on his side that he needs support with, or if there's any concerns from the field that he may have been reported up through him. We discuss anything that has came up there. And then I just kind of check in to see how he's doing. I do that every day with him, just to make sure we're on the same page and everything is fine, that nothing has came up. And it just keeps that communication open between us, which is really good because it's just the two of us talking, and it's nothing formal that he has to have prepared or ready. It's just, we talk about the day and what's happening.
Brilliant. And for more than 2 decades, your career focused heavily on quality management, quality control. How does that background now influence how you lead large-scale field service projects today?
I'd say the biggest thing is definitely processes. So at one time I had 27 projects going at once. And the big thing is to have the same process from project to project. It doesn't matter, where they are, where they're located, but to have the same expectations, same deliverables from project to project keeps that consistency, as well as ensuring all the field personnel have the same understanding and same training. So I always make sure that they understand as far as my expectations, that they understand what is correct, what's not correct, what is a high risk sort of thing versus something that maybe is not. So that definitely does, make a big difference through the construction process. And even when I'm on a project site and I see contractors, if they have good processes in place, you usually have a very good project that has came out of that, because then people are following the same routine, and it makes it so much easier for the project.
Consistency and communication seem to be the 2 leading factors there.
Yes, yes, definitely. With as well as making sure you have trained personnel. And I think that's a big thing right now in the industry is having trained people, but taking that time to make sure that people understand that they're trained. There's so much right now with people jumping, we'll say from project to project, and finding the people that have that experience. And I'll tell you, I think it was last year I went to a project site and came across a project, and there was a young person that had passed away during that project. And it wasn't that, you know, that person did something wrong. It was that there was a lack of training, and that training really needs to be pushed all the way through so that people understand, at these large energy sites, there's a lot of power, and there's, live connections. You're dealing with, a lot of energy there. So it's very dangerous, and that they understand what they're working with, that they understand what they're doing and what the consequences of their job, so that they do it correctly. That's one of the big problems I see right now is that lack of training.
Would you say, obviously you've mentioned it there, that there is a skills gap currently. Would you say that's getting bigger, or through, more intensive training, that's actually shrinking, that's being adjusted?
Uh, I would say because there's an increase of projects that's happening worldwide as far as data centers and best centers, there's just not enough trained people. So, if you have finished one project, they feel that you're trained. And that's not always the case because, a project is very large. So your tasks that you may have been doing on one project, they be completely different the next project. So I don't think that there's enough time in that training aspect. Uh, just because they don't have the people, you know, around, they're just pulling people that as long as it shows you've finished one project on your resume, they're grabbing those people. And as projects increase, the more that we're getting into data centers and best centers, um, they just need people. They need workers that can do these jobs.
And that's the solution, you feel, is it?
Mhm.
You get more people on board with that skills.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Yeah, so your career has, it's fascinating me, the industries you've been a part of. So you've been through industrial machinery, telecoms, and obviously into renewable energy. From your perspective, how do those sectors differ when it comes to meeting customer expectations, complex planning and compliance? Is there a difference, or is it all very much same?
No, it's not the same. The industrial is more mature, is a more mature system. I mean, it's been around on the industrial side for quite a long time. I mean, you look back, even World War II, they brought in the military standards at that point, which brought in sampling and doing sampling inspections in the manufacturing. And then I think in the 70s came the British standard, 5750, and then ISO 9000. So all these standards in the industrial have been around for quite a long time, and they understand that there's an expectation to their clients, to their workers. So there is that built into those industries. Telecom was a little later starting. They started, I think, in I want to say 97 when the TL 9000 came out. So I even actually sat on the board for the TL 9000 and developed that standard there. And it focuses a lot on, it pulls in the ISO 9000, but it also pulls in some metrics and performances, which are really good for that industry. But when you get to the green energy sector, you don't have any of that. There's no push from any entity or any body, right, to push that mandate down to ensure that that quality is built into these projects. So, in the other industries, it was kind of pushed down and expectations, from above that, they expected suppliers to have this quality built in. But you don't get that in the energy sector, which makes it very difficult sometimes when you're dealing with quality or reliability of an energy site.
Why do you think that is? Is it because speed is being prioritized over quality in that sector?
Well, speed is. So for the energy sites, there is a mandate that you have to hit an energization date, and it can be quite costly if you miss those dates. So there is always that goal to hit that energization date. And of course, owners want to have that energization date hit so that they can start generating revenue right off that energy site. So that definitely is a big push for speed to be done. Um, but there's nobody really is pushing as far as the quality that people have to have a quality system or there has to be any type of quality. Where it's built in currently is in contracts, or if it's built into a design. But other than that, it's very hard. Sometimes when you go to a project site, and if it's not built into a contract, to be able to push some of those quality expectations down to that subcontractor who's building the project because it's not in the contract. That's really the only thing you have that's pushing any type of quality onto that production site or project site.
Interesting. you've touched on it there, like you've been a part of some real large scale infrastructure products. You still are a part of a lot of these products as well. Where were there any key lessons you learned about, the pace of the projects, the coordination, the planning? You've touched on there, like if you need to push this quality information down, like does that take up a lot of the planning that goes into it, the timescales?
No, no, I don't think so. Uh, I think from a construction perspective, I've been in a place where I've always been asked, "Oh, that's going to cost us money. Quality costs money," and it doesn't. It does not. In fact, if you have a good process and good quality, it will actually make things go faster because you don't have the rework that you have to go back and fix something. And that eats up a lot of costs and it eats up your schedule. So by having things in place and you have a system of how things are to operate, and there's a sequence of operation, right? As you build something, there's that sequence and everybody's following the same sequence. Everybody's following the same expectations of what is considered good of their installation. Then it's going to move quickly through your production. You're going to get the output, right? And you're also going to get good product so that you're not going back and fixing because, that's just going to eat the schedule, like I said, and create a lot of additional monies having to fix items.
Yeah, and I'm guessing that's the same for the compliance and regulatory demands as well. That's not going to slow down projects and processes because that's been planned for.
Yes, yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
slow them down at all. Like I said, if you can have that built in right up front, there's no delay at all. In fact, those companies that actually have that in their system, they can usually jump on a project site and it can move very quickly compared to those, we'll say, that do not, because there's more of a hectic atmosphere. And even when you're on a site, Ryan, you can feel that tension from people, from workers, right? That if there is not that system or that process, you almost feel the pressure, the chaos, we'll say, from other individuals. That work and that project site, you already can tell it's going in the wrong direction, and it's not. You're going to have problems.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So you moved into the green energy sector at First Solar. We touched on this briefly. It was just 20 minutes down the road from you. You said, uh, that meant shifting to a much more field-based outdoor installation environment, which brings with it challenges. So how much of the design for these projects went into proactively planning for example, challenging weather conditions?
Well, engineers do plan for, especially, and they'll look at like 100-year floodplain to make sure that there's going to be no issues of washout. They do look at now a lot of companies looking at their products. Tracker systems, for instance, will have items put into their software to stow their tracker systems to prevent hail damage to glass and to modules, to solar modules. So there's a lot of design that has been built into the projects to help reduce some of these environmental impacts. But not only is it just the design, it's also the workmanship on the project. So you could have all that built into your design, but then when you're building it, there's so many things that you do when you're building it that can also affect from the environment. So if you're in an area where there's cold or frost, you want to make sure that cable's deep enough, and you also want to make sure there's enough slack because you're going to get frost and you're going to get frost heave, and that makes things move. So you want to make sure when you're installing that you have enough slack so things can shift and move with the cold and the frost, that things can expand and contract. So even the workmanship during that installation makes a big difference, not just the design, but also how they're installing, because you could have, a failure, it seems like a small failure on the site, but because they're so large, that the impact financially could be, quite tremendous.
And obviously, it's not just the installation
Mhm.
process that needs planning for that. It's the aftercare, the preventive maintenance as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, awesome. So as well as solar, wind, oil and gas, RRC also has an engineering group specializing in data centers and battery energy storage, something that's very much at the focal point in this AI-led world now. What is the responsibility of your department in these projects, and what sort of demand have you seen over the last few years for data center construction?
Well, data centers are relatively new, and the more data that we are going as a world, as a world group, going to crypto and everything else that we're talking about, the more data centers we're going to need for all that storage of data. So that has been the big push lately, and it's a newer into the industry. BESS is also somewhat new, but it's been around for quite a while. And then, of course, then you have the other energy storage sites. So I myself am responsible for sometimes the scope of work. So defining a scope of work for a contractor to build one of those sites. And then also on site field personnel who will monitor the construction, ensure that there's no reliability issues or quality issues that might prevent interconnection to the grid. And then there's also making sure that we're following through to see if they're meeting, contractors meeting all their contractual demands, and we have no issues there. And then we also support sometimes with commissioning it, meaning we energize the site. We'll do testings to make sure it's grounded correctly. We'll do various terminations for that particular site so that we can energize it for that client.
And is it a similar case of speed being prioritized over quality aspects on these constructions of data centers? Because the amount of data center and battery storage that is needed or required going forward now.
Because again, there's no push for that quality. The only quality you get that you can reference back to is again the contract or your drawings. Nothing that, for instance, on the other industries, you can use the TL 9000 or the ISO 9000, which has strict mandates that you're asking a company. In these areas, there isn't that. So it does pose some issues, we'll say, with quality. And then when you're really on the site, you're really looking to see, okay, I see these issues. How is it going to affect the energization? Am I going to have something blow up, have a thermal event? Am I going to have something that I can fix when it's turned on? It safely can be fixed. So you're always constantly looking at something and determining the risk of it, if it can be energized or not energized, and then if it will last. So a lot of times what happens is they're rushing to do these things, but there's also the reliability. They're supposed to last 25, 35 years is the design expectancy. So you want to make sure that they are reliable. But since there's no push right now, you'll hear comments that, I'm covered by my warranty or will be covered by the insurance companies. So you'll get that a lot, which is not good, right? Because sometimes there's companies out there that want to cover it to get more clients, so they'll cover it in their warranty. But then you have insurance companies that are covering claims that maybe they shouldn't be covering. So that you have an industry right now that there's no, like I said, when you don't have that structure built in like the other industries where there's that mandate, you're kind of relying then, if something goes wrong on those two courses, either your warranty with your supplier or your insurance company.
Yeah. And this is something we spoke about the other day. These projects can create community and environmental pushback. I've seen it firsthand here in the UK. There's a big push of data centers currently. It's the footprint that's needed, the resources that are required to run these data centers. How do you balance technical delivery with public concerns?
The best is to educate. Is a lot of people, and I think I gave you a story of when I was on the very first project, solar project, and it was the largest in the world, and it was only 60 megawatts, which is very small now. And there was so much attention. We had planes flying over above taking pictures. We had people around the fence taking loud telescopic pictures because it was new. So the best way is to really educate the community. What is in their backyard? How is it going to affect them? Because everybody's concerned. How is it going to affect them? Is it going to cause a noise? Is it going to cause additional traffic? How is it going to affect their lives? So letting them know, giving them that information. And the other best thing too is when a plant is energized, a lot of times you can make like an open house, we'll say, right? And invite the community in. Do a walkthrough with someone who's from the operation maintenance side, let's say, walk them through the plant, explain how it works, explain how it's affecting the community, how it's, how it's helping the community really makes a big difference. And it makes an acceptance with the community because it's then could be something that they're very proud of that they have that and that, their community has this additional support that if something was to go wrong, they have this backup or they have this additional energy that's coming from somewhere. So it's all about educating and helping them understand what you're doing.
Making them feel valued, a part of the
Hmm.
project, I guess. Yeah.
Definitely. Yes.
While we're on that, obviously the end goal of delivering these projects is, to achieve good customer and end user satisfaction as well. So in your experience, what do you think end customers value the most between speed, communication, and quality?
Right now, speed, because of that energization date, there can be fines that if they don't meet those dates, and those fines are very, very large. So their first priority is to hit those dates to make sure that it hasn't slipped. So one of the metrics is constantly always looking for installation, your numbers of install making sure that you're going to be able to hit that date. But the other side of it for an owner that's going to own that site is you want to have that quality. So you want the reliability because, as I was saying, it's supposed to last 25, 35 years. And something so small as just a little zip tie, when you think of a little plastic zip tie that you hold something, if it's not the correct zip tie, one of those could fall down and some of them only last 3 months. And you're talking these sites that are 800 megawatts. Well, now you're talking it could be over $1 million just to fix the small little zip tie that was incorrectly used. So those are the things that as an owner as well, they want to make sure that it's reliable, that they don't see any concerns, they don't see any risks. Otherwise, they're going to be paying additional money, for this failure that's going to happen on their project site, which then in turns creates a downtime. You can't now generate revenue, you can't generate energy if it creates a downtime. You're not going to the meter, so you can't put that energy out there. Definitely, those are two things that you really want to concentrate on. Both the install and then also the quality reliability.
Now I'm really curious of the zip tie budget on these projects.
What is that zip tie?
And we touched on it there, just the metrics that you like to measure in terms of success. What sort of metrics or KPIs do you feel are best when it comes to delivering on the projects themselves or setting for the crews that are installing and delivering on these projects?
Yeah. Well, one is the install numbers. They should be keeping an installation of how many, what they're installing per day. They can also see if they have their processes in good place, you can actually look at from one crew to the other and see maybe why one crew is doing better than the other. And maybe it's how they've set up things. And you can use things such as lean practices where you might prep, component parts that make it faster for the installation. You might put your washers and your hardware all together. So that's faster when you're putting it together. So you want to find out, if you're looking at those install numbers, and if you can narrow it down to production crews, then you can see maybe why one crew is doing better than the other. But not only just speed and install numbers, again, you want to look at the quality of their installation. Are they having to go back and fix things that their quality people have identified? Because then, they're just doing useless install numbers because you're now going back and fixing all their work. So you want to keep those in parallel that you're looking and reviewing those to help. Obviously it helps your company to reduce, the rework, but at the same time, it's going to help you get more efficient, make you hit those dates that you need to hit. It'll be a lot cheaper and beneficial for your company. So those are things definitely, every company should be looking at for those KPIs.
So you'll be looking at things like the amount of site revisits or first time fix rate of a certain crew on the installation.
Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Earlier you said at one point you imagined 27 projects, which can seem quite overwhelming, particularly for me. So I'm really fascinated in understanding the types of technology and tools that you've used, to manage these projects and certain teams. So what tools or systems did you find most effective for helping you to manage multiple areas of a project? Is there one particular tool that you really enjoyed, or is there a mixture?
Well, how I've done this is I've created standardization, right, from one project to the other. So first, always make sure I hire good people, right? Hire good people always makes you look better, right? If you hire the other people, hire people that if you don't know something, it's good that they know it. So I always hire, really good. And then I also make sure they're trained. And then the secondly is always have the same standard and processes. So I will have the same reporting structure that they all have to report the same. I want to know their highlights, to be able to say, great job. That's fantastic. This is happening on your project. But I also want to know the constraints because that's where you're going to find the issues. The other thing that I do like seeing in the data that's coming across is pictures. Pictures tell you so much, right? So if they include pictures or snapshots in their reporting structure, it definitely sometimes helps me that I can maybe pick something out of that picture and it identifies for me that, oh, there's an issue or there's a concern on that project site. But at the same time, when I have all these projects, I want everybody doing the same thing. So what's acceptable at one site should be acceptable at the other site. And it's understanding, where that acceptable limit is. So that's where the training comes in, so that everybody's on the same page and speaking the same language. But definitely the reporting structure, the pictures, the communication that way. I have used different types of software.
Hmm.
I've had some failures with those
Hmm.
because when sometimes you're in the field, you don't get good reception. Sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere and you're trying, just like self-service, you're trying to find that tower. So sometimes that fails, but it is good sometimes with the phones to be able to take the pictures. You can date stamp them. Now you can put a location, you could put a GPS location exactly where you found the issue, which definitely helps when you're in these large sites of 800 megawatts or 500 megawatts. It can actually pinpoint exactly where the problem is. So those are very helpful, and to be able to upload that information into their report. So definitely, if they can do that, that's what I would suggest.
And when you're dealing with so many different contractors, crews, teams, etc., it's good to have it all in one system, you know?
Yes, yes. Yeah, there's usually a lot of projects will have a database of some sorts. There's multiple ones out there, but all the project databases are set up the same. And there's usually a whole area for which documents and how the documents are uploaded. So that definitely helps for archiving and being able to find the data.
Digital transformation has been a bit of a buzzword among utilities and energy operators lately. You know, they're almost like playing catch up, a lot of people are. If you had to recommend one area of investment in technology that field service teams should prioritize going into next year or over the next few years, what would you recommend it be?
Well, I have seen, which are pretty neat. So a couple of the shows I've seen these robots, and they're low to the ground, and they're more for the operation and maintenance of the projects. But they'll go low to the ground, and they help identify loose connections. They'll identify broken pieces of glass. They'll identify, whatever's basically built into that AI of that particular robot. But it saves so much time. So when you think, these large sites out in the middle of nowhere, you're dealing with long grass, you're dealing with snakes, you're dealing with, a lot of different insects and everything else out there. And to have people walk up and down those rows, obviously it's going to take you a long time. So it's nice with these robots, they'll actually cover a whole area. They can go low, they can detect if there's connections that are loose or burnt or which definitely saves a lot of time with the operation and maintenance crew to know to locate it. The only thing I would advise is with the AI, with some of the tools that are coming out now to help, is making sure that people still understand the why. Like, why did it fail? Why did it, how can I prevent this? Because sometimes we rely on, oh, let's just fix it. It says this is broken. Let's just fix it. It's telling me how to fix it. But you really need to know the why behind it and understand how that failure happened. Because if we lose that, then we lose the knowledge, right? And we lose the ability to train others. So that's the only thing there that I sometimes see is if you do ask some people that are using some AI, they'll just say, well, it says I have to do this. So it's understanding why you're doing something is the best thing.
And I guess that kind of addresses two concerns that you've touched on already in terms of the skills gap and speed required, you know? Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
fascinating.
Because yeah, to do the robot, it was so fast. They're nice. They're low to the ground, and they have a nice traction system on. I've seen on some of them. So yeah, it definitely helps with the speed.
Yeah. From everything you've seen at RRC, what is the single biggest challenge facing large scale infrastructure projects today?
The biggest thing is accountability. Um, Accountability is missing out of this whole sector. And that kind of goes back to these failures, right, that are happening. Um, because there's no mandate of quality all the way and you have to think just it's not quality on a construction site, but it needs to be quality all the way through your whole system. So your suppliers, your vendors, all the way through that support and build that project. Um, so since there's no accountability, it makes it very hard when there is failures, because if you have a contract and they're rushing to get it energized, you might know that there's some things that are wrong, but it's like, well, hurry up and get it energized. Then you energize it. Then 6 months down the road, it fails. Well, the contract doesn't say the contractor's responsible. So then you're trying to see, well, who's responsible? And that's where it gets kind of fuzzy because it's trying to go back to insurance companies or they're trying to go back for warranty. So there's really that lack of no one's taking accountability of the work that's being performed or the product that's out there. Suppliers are trying to say, hey, we're not responsible if you installed it wrong. And now they're trying to cover themselves with, taking pictures and sending people there, of mishandling, let's say, a product, et cetera, to cover themselves. So everybody's trying to cover themselves, but there needs to be something out there that says, okay, someone's going to be held accountable if this goes wrong. And your contract for your workmanship is going to last a year, and you're going to be accountable for anything that's defined as workmanship. So some of those things need to be pushed down, because there is nothing right now that's doing that.
And I think I know the answer to this, but where do you see the biggest growth over the next decade in terms of renewable energy storage, oil and gas, and data centers? I've
Data
nailed it, haven't
centers.
I?
Yeah, data centers. Like I said, it's new, but it's growing quickly, very
Okay,
quickly.
wow. Yeah.
The more and more data that we're compiling, in our countries, the more data we need to store it. So those are definitely the large. That's going to be a huge, large industry, and it's growing quickly in
Would you
that
say
area.
only about 3 years ago you might have said renewable?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wow.
and then a couple of years ago, it would have been BESS, battery energy storage,
Yeah.
but now it's just taken off. Everything is going more electronic, more AI, more data that they need the storage, data storage.
Well, yeah. Sandy, we like to finish these chats with giving you the opportunity to give some really solid advice and insights to aspiring field service leaders. A lot of our listeners out there really value this. So, you've had a really incredible career in somewhat a male dominated sector. What challenges did you face early on, and what's changed, if anything, today?
Yes, I have. I've had a lot of many challenges and still have a lot of challenges. But I think the biggest thing is getting the respect. So I might be hired and I have the education, I have the background, I have the experience, but sometimes it's not enough. You still have to prove yourself. So that's hard, always that you're trying to always have to prove. But definitely, it has been challenging and it does make it hard sometimes. But I always say, you got to be true to yourself. If you thoroughly believe that something is incorrect or if you believe in something, don't be afraid to speak up. Uh, I find that one of my biggest challenges is that if you are sitting in a room, and usually I'm the only female sitting in the room, um, if there is discussions and there's a difference of opinion, usually it will get louder, especially towards myself, and it will get very loud. It might get very intimidating. And I say, always stay calm, always stay relaxed, uh, always be professional. answer the questions that you can answer. You don't need to be sucked into that type of negativity because that's a deterrent and you don't want that. So you just kind of brush that aside, and, try to stay, like I said, true to yourself. Try to, um, you know, and I think that honestly gives more respect to some of the people in that room than to see someone kind of be humiliated or crushed, right? They will respect that you didn't jump or that you didn't scream or get upset or walk out, that you stayed calm and that you answered their questions or stood up for whatever that comment or, whatever the situation was.
What is the one piece of advice you would give to women entering, the field service, construction, energy, infrastructure sectors today?
I would say, um, be true to yourself, right? Because you always I see some people say, "Well, they aren't gonna like this, or they aren't gonna I'm not gonna say anything." And that's not right. You shouldn't be afraid to say something. And I always say what's the worst? I always say to myself, "What's the worst that's going to happen if I say something?" And the very worst is I could maybe be fired. And I always think, "Well, then that wasn't the job for me." And I think we put a lot of stress sometimes on ourselves that we're afraid to do that because you're afraid to speak up because you don't want that. But it's not. I've had um, some pretty scary situations myself happen, and um, I've had where people have been really red in their face and had their hands on my neck and not happy with me. And you always, like I said, always stay relaxed, always stay calm, always be professional. But for women, the other thing I say is that when you leave a project site or when you leave work, that stress is in you. And don't be afraid to cry. Doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're inferior, that you couldn't handle it. That's just how we, release some of that emotion, and there's nothing wrong with that. I know I've talked to some colleagues, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't mean to cry, or I was so upset in the meeting," and that's fine. That's how we deal with it. But I do say, try not to do it there. you know, Step out of the room if you have to. Go into the restroom if you have to, or go to your car and give yourself that time to just let it out. It's usually when you're facing some of these things, it's never against the person, and it's usually that you have said something that's correct. And they don't like that you have either called something out or called something correct. And that's usually when the tension gets higher in a room, right? It gets louder. It might get to a point where they're insulting or they're calling you names or whatever. And that's where you stay just calm. Uh, don't let it affect you and stay true to yourself. Like I said, if that's what you believe, don't back down. That's why you've been put in a position where you are, and stay strong. I know it sounds
Sandy, that's brilliant.
odd.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice, really insightful. And I'm hoping a lot of listeners will take that on board as well as they enter into sectors like this and leadership roles as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. So, Sandy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, well,
I've
thank
thoroughly
you.
enjoyed it. Yeah, and sharing your practical views on what it takes to deliver quality at scale. Particularly going to go away and look at the zip tie budget, as I mentioned there. Little things like that.
That's one industry I wish I would have had shares in back then.
Very good. So thank you again, Sandy.
All
Thank you all
right.
for listening. Yeah,
Thank you
and
so much. Thank you. Have a
excellent.
great
And
day.
we'll see you on the next episode.
All right. Thank you.